So if you're anything like me, whenever you think of modern metal guitars, you probably think of guitars kind of like this. And I would be willing to say you almost never think of guitars like this. However, in today's video, I'm going to show you that I don't necessarily think that that is the case anymore. Now more than ever, with the quality of guitars from companies like Squier, and with the ability to process your guitar with things like drop pedals, which is something that we see a lot in modern metal nowadays, you can use really any guitar you want to make a really slamming metal track, kind of like this. Okay, so here I am in Logic in my Squier only metal project. I want to take a look at just the whole project. We'll take a look ultimately at the guitars and the bass here in a second, but I think it would be cool just to run through the whole project. So the first thing is kind of like this little post-production intro to the whole song. So I actually bounced down all the instruments, so it's going to be hard for me to look at the virtual instruments for you. But this is just some kind of stock Logic synth that I found, and I just took some high end out and I added a decapitator and pretty much just absolutely crushed it with the punish button on there. And then ultimately I had to turn it down quite a bit with a gain plugin. That sounds pretty cool. And then I have this just as another stock Logic kick drum, and I have it following the kick pattern of the intro riff. Probably my favorite part of the intro production is these kind of like weird gasping noises, kind of like airy things. I took that from the intro of Engrave from Fit for a King. I think it sounds pretty cool. And I actually used something on this sound that I actually used on the guitar sound, and that is THU's pitch shifter. It is by far one of the best plug-in pitch shifters I've ever used, and that's still on the guitar track, so we'll talk about that later. And then ultimately I have just like a intro guitar that is playing the main riff of the song an octave up, and it is going through Pro Q3, and it's on the microphone or on the phone preset. And I split it up to pan it, and I did like a stutter edit on that. And there's a couple more post-production things I'll show you. So the hits and the swells are from Joey Sturgis Tones, but this ambience is actually out of Peter McKinnon's sound effect pack. And I just took a whole bunch of the highs out of it, so it just sounds more just out of the way. And then I have some hits and swells elsewhere in the song. Pretty much just anywhere I wanted extra impact on the riff itself, I added an impact. Okay, so let's take a look now at the rhythm guitars. Like I was saying earlier in the video, I'm using my Squier Mascis Jazzmaster, and it is tuned in drop D with, I think it feels like they're 9s, so they're relatively small strings on there. And I thought about just making a riff just in drop D, but then I was like, you know what, let's see if I can find a decent pitch shifter online. And I found out that THU has a really cool pitch shift module on their thing, and I have this just with my Slate with my Slate subscription. So I have it pitched down -5 semitones, which puts it in drop A. Let's just take a listen to it. So really, it doesn't change the character of the guitar tone a ton, in my opinion. And actually, I'm using the Fort and Cali suite, and I actually dialed in the guitar tone with the pitch shifter on there. So the guitar tone was dialed in with the drop A processing in mind. So honestly, to me, it sounds a little weird if you take the pitch shifter off. It sounds worse than it does if you keep the pitch shifter on. And this is just the Chug Life preset on the right guitar though. It's the same thing with the pitch shifter, and it is the Chug Life preset again. However, on the cabinet section, I changed the microphone to a C414. It was a dynamic 421. I changed it to a 414 to just get a little bit of difference there. And this is what those sound like together. Yeah, so those actually sound pretty sweet. For it to be a Squier Jazzmaster Jazzmaster with single coils, it sounds really, really cool. All I really did was just on my Apollo Twin and in the plugins themselves, I gained up the input a little bit, so it had a bit higher of an input because the single coils typically aren't super hot. So I turned up the input volume and it sounded really cool. Obviously, it doesn't have the same characteristic as like a humbucker or an EMG or a Fishman Fluence or anything like that. But I think, you know, you increase the input gain, then I think you're going to get a really, really cool overdriven sound, especially with something like the Fort and Cali suite. Let's take a look at the lead guitar. And I was feeling a little lazy this morning, so instead of tracking it twice, I just made the channel a stereo channel and threw on this S1 imager to get a little stereo width out of that. And for the lead sounds, I'm using Antbox from Mercurial. I didn't really change anything. I just turned on the overdrive and gained that up a little bit, and then I turned on the delay and the reverb, and it sounds really cool. It's that really kind of ambient sound I want out of my lead guitars. So that's what my guitars sound like. Fort and Cali suite with a THU pitch shifter. It's shifting it down 5 semitones to put it in drop A, and that sounds really cool. Let's take a look at the bass sounds. So for my bass, I'm just using a Squier P bass. There's absolutely nothing special about this guitar. I have absolutely no idea about the pickups. You know, it just is what it is. It's got a standard normal set of bass strings on there. They aren't big strings. So it's also tuned in drop D. The DI here has been pitch shifted as well, and I will just take all these plugins off so you can see that. And so I will say that's not an incredibly good DI for a metal guitar sound. And of the two guitars I used today, both of them being Squier guitars, both of them being single coils, neither one of them really being made for modern metal guitar sounds. In my opinion, the Squier P-Bass is definitely the weaker of the two. I know some people use the P-Bass for metal stuff. I think the Jazz Bass is a bit more popular, but I'm leaning towards something that maybe made a little bit more for modern metal, maybe has a 5th string on it or something. Anyways, let's just take a look at the bass sound and see what we came up with. So I split my bass into 2 things. I have a high and a low track. The first thing I do is suck out all the way up to 1,441 hertz. So you're just getting the very, very high end. And then I threw it through a stomp from Waves, just using, a tube screamer. Getting it to sound kind of growly. Throw it through a BOD from TSE. And now that's kind of when you're starting to sound like you're just hitting like power cables with a shovel or something. For me, whenever I'm looking for that really nasty growling bass picking sound, I always throw a tube screamer in front of the BOD plugin or just kind of any kind of Sans amp plugin that you can find. However, I wanted to take a little bit of high end off of that, so I threw it in the Fort and Cali suite, and I picked up the Chug Life preset, and I'm throwing it through the same cab impulse. And I heard this from Joey Sturgis Tone's YouTube channel, that throwing your bass through the same cab impulse that you throw your guitars through will help it sit together a little bit better. So that's something I've been trying to do recently. You guys can be the judge of that. Let me know in the comments if you think the bass and the guitar are sitting together relatively well. So then after that, we had a little bit of mud I wanted to clean up. So I'm just using that for the very, very scrapey pick sound. And then the low is the same thing, exact same DI. but I've just got a ton of the, like all this taken out. It's all the way down to 100 hertz and then up to 20 hertz. And then I just limited the heck out of it. So let's hear what that sounds like with our guitars. To me, I can still hear just a little bit of that bass scraping. It's not poking out and sounding really obnoxious. And then that low end is just like a brick wall. It's just hanging out right there and holding down the low end. I really, really like that. All right, let's take a look at drums really quickly. It's a contact instrument. This is Get Good Drums, Architects. This is my favorite drum library to write with and produce with at the moment. It just sounds really, really good out of the box. It's not too hard for me to use. Most of the time, honestly, I'm not even splitting tracks unless I want a different kick drum sound or a different snare sound. I just have the stereo track with some compression and some clipping on it. I will say that I go to the mixer in the plugin itself and I adjust the balance of the kick and the snare. I turn those up a little bit and I turn the reverb and the room sound up on the snare a little bit because I like a roomy and a reverby snare in my mixes. And then finally, at the end on the master chain, I'm throwing it through FG Gray, doing a little bit of compression on that. I'm doing Saturn, and I'm actually saturating the like high mids and highs a little bit. I'm not doing any saturation on the end, but to me that actually made a pretty big difference. Just makes it sound a little bit warmer and a little fuller in my opinion. And I don't even know if this does anything. I just wanted to give it a try to see how it sounded in my vehicle. I really don't think it made that big of a difference. But I saw someone on YouTube the other day doing some mid-side processing, and they were turning the mids down a little bit. So their guitars were supposed to sit out on the sides a little more. Like I said, I don't know if that actually did anything. And then I capped it out with Ozone 9 with just a little bit of limiting and some EQ moves that I let the AI do. Whenever I'm doing these demos for YouTube and stuff, I always just let the AI do its thing. And to me, it almost always sounds better. So yeah, that's the mix we did, and that is how we got our guitar and our bass sounds using a Squier Mascis Jazzmaster and a Squier P bass. Let's wrap the video up. So I hope you enjoyed that song and the run through and logic of how I made that song. To reiterate what I said at the beginning of the video, people like Andrew Baina and Stay Metal Ray and people in Wage War, there are a ton of people who are using Jazzmaster style guitars, and some people are even using Squier guitars to make really, really slamming metal tracks. So if you're someone who, like me several years ago, only has a Squier Stratocaster, a Squier Telly, or a Jazzmaster, or just really anything that's not like a high quality metal guitar with humbuckers, I really don't think you should let that deter you from making a really cool metal track, and doing all you can to make really solid metal riffs. Again, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did enjoy the video, please do hit the like button as well as the subscribe button, and I will see you guys in the next video.